Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Lit Talk, Sparking Asian American Studies in CT Schools. A little feedback. I'm Joseph Morello. I'm the director of the Connecticut Literary Festival, which produces the Lit Talks at Central Connecticut State University. I want to thank the English department at CCSU and our Dean Robert Wolf for their support. Our spring programming is supported in part by the CT Humanities and the Center for the Book. And I want to thank Lisa Comstock for her help and Scott Waynes. Lit Talks are produced by the Connecticut Literary Festival. We also publish the Connecticut Literary Anthology, and we produce the On Ground Festival in the fall. Our technical producer is Anna Cristiano. Thank you, Anna. After we're done tonight, the program will be archived on our website. So if you want to share it with friends, you can please do that. Tonight's a special Lit Talk. We've been producing for a while. It was going to be at Real Artways, but here we're online. So I'm happy you can be with us. And it was produced in collaboration with Julia Whitner at the Art Gallery. She's the Art Gallery Director at Eastern Connecticut State University. In 2001, Eastern was granted an NEA Big Read Award. And if you don't know what that is, the National Endowment for the Arts Big Read program, it creates a selection of culturally relevant books and offers grants to organizations to create programming around those books to bring to communities to create conversations like we're having this evening. And Eastern was one of 61 organizations nationwide to be offered one of the grants. So it's a big win for Connecticut Literary Arts. And thank you to Julia for reaching out and collaborating with her. It's been really a lot of fun. Tonight, we're going to have the chat open. So you're welcome to chat as you go. At the bottom of the screen, you see Ask a Question. If you click on that, you can type in a question or a comment, and then you'll be able to kind of communicate with our guests and in the conversation as we go. And so you can also vote on a question or vote on a comment, and they kind of go to the top of the list. So that's how we'll get you involved tonight. And please use the chat as we go, and please use the chat in a nice way. And the person in charge of actually determining if your question will be asked is our moderator for the night, and that is Jason Oliver Chang. Jason is the Associate Professor of History and Asian American Studies at the University of Connecticut, where he also serves as the director of the Asian American Studies Institute. As a public servant, Jason sits on the board, many boards, of the Board of Education of the West Hartford Public Schools, the Governor's Hate Crimes Advisory Council, and the State Historical Records and Archives Review Board, where I think he just told me he's doing a little work right now. He is also a founding member of Make Us Visible CT, a grassroots organization which led the charge for the introduction of Asian American and Pacific Islander studies in Connecticut public schools. So Jason, thank you for moderating tonight. It's great to see you. Oh, we're gonna.
There we go.
Yeah, all right. There we go.
Joseph, thank you so much. This is such a treat, and to be able to participate in this wonderful series that has been happening, and all the work that you've done and everyone else on the team to bring the CT Lit Fest and these Lit Talks together. They're wonderful.
Well, thanks, Jason. We have COVID to thank for one thing. It's CT Lit Talks. They forced us online, and it's been a great thing. So we got people all over. So, Jason, I'm going to leave you to it. Have a great night. I'll see you guys at the end to talk about future programming.
Excellent. Thank you so much for bringing us together. Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Chang. The title of our program tonight, Sparking Asian American Studies in Connecticut Schools with Thi Bui's The Best We Could Do. This wonderful book here, it's probably mirrored for you, we're here because of a groundswell of support for introducing Asian American and Pacific Islander Studies curriculum in our schools. Through the Make Us Visible campaign, which started a year ago, we're now seeing preparations for the creation of a K-8 model curriculum for Connecticut schools. This goes along with other model curriculum in Native studies, LGBTQIA studies, and a number of other really exciting, changes to the social studies curriculum. So we knew that for this curriculum to succeed, it needs to be built from the ground up with teachers and students and families and scholars. We knew that these all had to be a part of the big picture. We know that a kind of plug and play kind of model for curriculum building just wasn't going to work for this. This isn't just something that we wanted to, have a box checked off. We wanted to really transform how Asian Americans are treated in the curriculum, but then also how to involve communities in their schools. And so, one of the best ways to spark these kinds of conversations is through with wonderful literature, with award-winning literature. And so when Julia Wintner at ECSU reached out to experiment with a kind of public school extension program for the Big Reads at their university, this was a perfect chance for us to partner and really begin the process of experimenting and creating an Asian American studies that is homegrown in Connecticut. So we have a wonderful lineup tonight. We're going to hear from Quan Tran. She's a senior lecturer and senior program coordinator in the Ethnicity, Race, and Migration program at Yale University. She earned her PhD in American Studies from Yale University. Her research and teaching interests include critical refugee studies, Vietnamese boat people, Asian American studies, comparative ethnic studies, migration studies, diaspora and transnational studies, memory studies, and food studies. Her book manuscript, Anchoring Vietnamese Boat People's History and Memory, examines refugee identity, community, and cultural formations in global Vietnamese diaspora by tracing contemporary efforts in remembering the Vietnamese boat people exodus in Southeast Asia, Western Europe, Australia, North America, and cyberspace. So Dr. Tran is also a poet and translator. Incredibly lucky to have you with us tonight, Quan, and to have you as a part of the Make Us Visible team. We're so incredibly lucky to have such rich scholarly backgrounds, bringing to illuminate the value of this work, but then also as a community member, bringing this work to many different corners within Connecticut. And so Quan will be discussing the significance of the best we could do for high school curriculum and what does what's the catalyst that refugee stories, Vietnamese refugee stories found in the best we could do, how can it catalyze different kinds of conversations that are super important for the vision and the impact that we think Asian American studies can have in our schools. So secondly, we also have JHD, Jennifer Hekila Diaz, and they identify as Korean American, Asian American, and biracial. For over 2 decades, they have worked in coalition with students, families, and school-based staff pursuing educational equity, most of those years as a teacher in school administration and instructional coaching, and some of those years in education nonprofit work. So they have also had the privilege of supporting and partnering with thousands of students, families, teachers, and school teachers. Currently, JHD works at New Haven Promise as the Chief of Talent and Operations, and at Fund for Teachers Connecticut as a program officer. They are part of the CT Anti-Racist Teaching and Learning Collective and is the co-founder of AAPI New Haven. They spend as much time as possible with young people, including their children, Magdalena and Gabriela. JHD is such a great partner in this work, and we could not have done this public school extension program without you. Your expertise in working with teachers and lifting up everyone around you has just been so tremendous. And you've also been, working as the activist in residence for the Institute. And this is really crucial kind of dimension of the public-facing work that the Institute does, and to really connect all these different opportunities around the state with people who want to see this work expand and thrive. So later, after we hear from both Quan and JHD, we are also going to hear from a teacher and a student, Keith Fowler and Tenzin. JHD, I'm going to let you introduce them, when we get to that part of the program. So I think now it's good for me to step aside and let Quan to take the stage. Explain a little bit more, give us some context on why this is such an important book, and how you see this fitting into a larger kind of project that we have in front of us to invent Asian American studies for our students.
Thank you so much, Jason. And it's lovely to be here, and thanks for including me as part of this Lit Talk. So as Jason mentioned, my background is in critical refugee studies, Asian American studies, comparative ethnic studies, and thinking about how ethnic studies as a field can both be a rigorous approach to knowledge production, but also a very reconstitutive way of understanding ourselves, our own histories, and communities that have been marginalized, right, or erased or displaced. And so with the book of Thi Bui, I was so excited that it was selected as a big, an NEA Big Read book because of the merits of it as a literary text, but also, right, I see it as an incredible primary source text that can help us understand the various events that an individual family has lived through and try to make sense of it, right? And so there's so many different reasons why the best we could do is such a compelling text to include in high school curricula across the nation, but also particularly in Connecticut. And so, and for me, I'm really drawn to actually how the book vividly connects individual life experiences to macro historical events and models within the text, right? A very collaborative way to foster intergenerational understandings through, the method that the author used, meaning using interviews with family members, right, to try and get at the various histories and experiences, but also through the genre of a graphic memoir. So the visual compelling images, right, and the renditions of these stories are so captivating, but also through the content, right, of the book covers, almost 100 years of Vietnamese history and Vietnamese American history. It takes, it addresses the life stories of 3 generations, right? And because of that, I think the text itself is so rich that it allows for so many different ways of entering it, right? It creates lots of platforms and spaces to envision, both as a story, but also for us to see ourselves in parts of it. And in the context of Connecticut, I appreciate how this text allows us to have a way to think about the stories of Asian Americans, particularly Vietnamese Americans, in the state, right? And I see the book adding depth to high school curriculum in English and language arts and historical histories and social studies. Curricula, but also the different standards. And I'm happy to speak about any of that if there's interest. But for now, I'd love to focus on how this book's potential impacts has on both, right, inside the classroom and beyond the classroom, and the different kinds of meaningful conversations that it can spark. And as you may know, Connecticut has a sizable population of Vietnamese Americans, about 11,000 people, according to more of the more recent census estimations. And many Vietnamese had arrived in Connecticut and the US between the mid-1970s and the 1990s as refugees in the aftermath of the Vietnam War. And the community since has continued to grow through the rise of 2nd generation, 3rd generation, and now there are 4th generation. So you can see how deeply rooted now, right, these communities are in the context of the US and in Connecticut. And Vietnamese Americans live scattered across the state with largest concentrations in the Hartford, Fairfield, New Haven, and New London counties. And even though Connecticut's Vietnamese population is relatively modest in comparison to larger states with larger ethnic accumulation like California, Texas, or Florida, one could argue that the presence of Vietnamese Americans in Connecticut is noticeable, right? Particularly through ethnic establishments, such as supermarkets, places of worship, restaurants, nail salons, all across the state. However, I think there's still very little understanding of these communities and these various pockets of Vietnamese Americans across Connecticut. And that speaks to the paradox that Vietnamese Americans, but also Asian Americans in general, face in the state of Connecticut in particular. And that paradox is being both visible and invisible, right? So visible oftentimes in terms of the kind of services that they provided through their businesses, but invisible in their histories and complex experiences and struggles, right? That goes unacknowledged. So the possibility of including a text like The Best We Could Do in high school curriculum allows for a concrete step, right, towards making Vietnamese Americans and Asian Americans visible in the classroom. And I would argue that the inclusion of the text does actually more than just having representation in the classroom, but it does something, it allows for a multilateral, the benefit is multifold, right? And so I just want to think about what those potential benefits might be. And so on the one hand, or on one level, the book directly resonates with students of Vietnamese American backgrounds, right? And whose families were or are directly affected by the events that the book mentioned. And oftentimes, due to the traumas that many refugees have experienced, it is unlikely that families have talked about it at length to their children or grandchildren, right? So having a book like this can be a powerful invitation to spark those conversations and help younger generations understand the complex histories of modern Vietnam, the Vietnam War itself, as well as their families' post-war migration stories, right? And this very grounding significance of this book is so powerful that it can be really inspiring for people to see themselves represented in the books that are being assigned in school. But one could also argue that having these conversations in class doesn't end there, right? They're bringing this home, and that means this assigned text is being read by multiple generations within a household across community, right? And I think that is such a huge impact that it could have. And then additionally, The Best We Could Do, may also be very impactful for non-Vietnamese American students. And here I particularly think about students whose families come from refugee or immigrant backgrounds. And, in both historical context, but also contemporarily. And in Connecticut, for example, we have so many different groups of refugees who've been resettled in the past several decades, right? We have Tibetan refugees, Congolese refugees, Sudanese refugees, Syrian refugees, Burmese refugees, Iraqi and Afghans, to name a few, right? And those individuals and families and students who experience displacement may see connections in a book like The Best We Could Do, right? And that would foster a kind of horizontal connection among peers in a classroom, connecting stories and experiences that may not seem so obvious in first pass, right? But if we dive into it at a deeper level and really thinking about the commonalities of experiences of displacement, the commonalities of adapting to new language, new culture, right? The commonalities of struggling with silences in families because of traumas. I think that creates such a wonderfully productive and affirming connection among the students who would be drawn to these texts. And then another aspect about this book that I find so rich is that it allows for non-refugee, non-immigrant students, right, to really sit with some of the historical events that the book addresses. And on the one hand, the book generates sympathy, right? And so oftentimes also empathy for people to understand the experiences that refugees and immigrants face in this country. And how people who had experienced war and forced migrations make sense of their own experiences, right? And reconstitute themselves in the communities that they currently live in. And more importantly, it also helps students, and this is just general students, right, to grasp the fact that the presence of refugees and immigrant groups in Connecticut and in the US, right, has to also be understood historically and directly tied to US foreign policies abroad and military involvement, right? And so here I'm thinking of Vietnamese Americans are here in part because of the extensive involvement of the US in the Vietnam War. Or more recently, if the news about refugees coming from Iraq and Afghanistan are products, right, of US involvement in those wars abroad. And this is important to underscore because oftentimes I think when we think about American history or the kind of different wars that the US is involved in, there's a tendency to only focus on the American perspective, right? Never mind leaving gaps of understanding about the experiences of people on whose lands or countries these wars were fought, and or people who might be because of this war entered the US, right? And so it allows for a much richer and complex understanding of history, not just with a capital H in terms of the different events, right? Or seen from the perspective of policies, but also to think about the human aspects of war and conflict and displacement, about people who are on the ground, who are experiencing these macro structures of displacements. And so the book, I think, are just so rich. The various panels, the uses of color, the interesting chronological defiance that the book plays around with, for those of you who've read it, right, really allows for us to have a much deeper engagement with all of these events. And then just one last point I wanted to mention is that this book can also bring out conversations for students who may have parents, grandparents, or even great-grandparents, right, who fought in some of these wars. And reading The Best We Could Do can really invite them to engage their family members, right, about their perspectives in these conflicts, and then foster a much more nuanced and more multilateral understanding of the past through these various actors. And so in the context of Vietnamese Americans and in context of Asian American, having The Best We Could Do and teaching it in these different ways can allow us to make these deep connections that have been missing, I think, in the way that we are thinking about public education. So thanks, Jason.
Incredible, Quan. You've summarized so many salient points about the brilliance of the book. And it really is an experience to read this. So if you haven't picked up this text, it's so worth it. And it's by the way, I should mention that Julia Wintner was also instrumental in getting more than 100 books out to these high school classes that we've partnered with. And so really, this is an incredible kind of catalyst for engaging students, and just being able to partner with the Big Reads program is really tremendous. You've highlighted so many important layers of analysis and impact that this text can have, and this is we expect that this is a kind of experiment that we want to keep doing. We want to keep doing this experiment with other literature, other works, because we know that these stories, while they haven't been shared as often or have been erased, that sharing texts like this in the schools is an important way to recover that memory and to and give families the opportunity to have conversations that either because of trauma, because of other kinds of erasures, have not had that story told. So, so Kwan, thank you so much. I invite folks to check out the conversation we had with Thi Bui, the author of The Best We Could Do last semester. So that link there is in the chat. I want to bring JHD in now so she can explain more about the public school extension program and the work that she's done with these other teachers, so that we can really kind of get a sense of why a teacher-centered approach to building curriculum is so important, you know.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't have me talk about the things that Kwan talked about, because I think Kwan talked about so many beautiful things about the book and said it so eloquently. So this year I've been the UConn Asian and Asian American Studies Institute activist in residence, and have had the pleasure of working with Jason and a group of 10 teachers and hundreds of students to get this text into classrooms and to help build these units and do it from the ground up, right? Do it in a grassroots way that's in line with culturally responsive pedagogy. So we have 10 teachers involved across the state that have been reading this beautiful text. 2 of them have already finished reading the text with their students in the fall, and the other 8 classroom teachers just started reading the book at the end of last month or the beginning of this month, basically with the change of academic terms. And there's a multitude of layers in what we're doing, right? From getting the text. So a big thank you again to Julia for getting us books and getting us more books now too, to ensure that all the students can access the text. And then getting the group of teachers together. So we have teachers who teach in traditional English teacher placements. We also have a teacher who's reading the text with creative writing classes. We have a teacher reading it in a peer leadership course. And then another teacher reading it in an early college course focused on health and community. So already we have this diversity of where are students accessing this text, and with which teacher in which type of course or discipline in their school. What else? We have 9th through 12th graders reading the text in Bridgeport, New Haven, Naugatuck, Hartford and East Hartford, in 10 different high schools. So in Bassick, Central, Capital Prep Harbor, New Haven Academy, Metropolitan Business Academy, Hill House, Wilbur Cross, Connecticut River Academy, Naugatuck High School, and Pathways Academy. And the grand majority of the students who are reading the text are students of color. And so teachers have been engaging with Jason and me and with people like Kwan through a bunch of different sort of monthly sessions. We started off with, you know, some hopes and dreams types of talks with the teachers. And then over time, we got to do different things, like we had a panel of professors who were reading the text also across various universities in Connecticut, including Kwan. And that was an amazing opportunity for teachers to not have to do the usual research through lots of sort of Google rabbit holes that teachers often have to use to sort of fill in the blanks, right? Especially around things like Asian American studies, which we don't learn much about, if any, in schools in our country. So getting to attend this expert panel and get this amazing backdrop of what's the history that goes with this text was huge for our teachers. We have community of practice sessions where we've discussed some curriculum guides that people put together and pulled out themes. And then the author talk was incredible. I mean, Thi Bui is also a former educator and teacher. So the way that she led us through all of her thinking about her creative process was incredible. If you haven't watched it, check out the link that Jason put in the chat. It was really an amazing talk. And then the 2 teachers like that I mentioned before who were able to do to get sort of a head start with the book, spent some time with us also in these communities of practice sessions. sort of unpacking some of the things that they were doing with their students and some of the things that their students were doing to respond to the text and share the insights they were gathering. Now that all the teachers have started the text, we have two really interesting sort of modules that we're doing with them. The first is these cross-school dialogues. So I paired each teacher with another teacher in the group, so they have this opportunity to either in real time or asynchronously have discussions across classrooms about the text, which is really exciting because we gave them some flexible options based on different teachers' ideas, which can include talking about Vietnamese immigrant and Vietnamese American communities in their city, and then getting to talk to students about those communities in a different city. So that's one of the pathways that they can go. Some of them are going to focus more on themes and get to do some comparing and contrasting about how they're talking about those themes across classrooms. So there's going to be a couple rounds of that. And then to build off of that afterwards, we have this art thing that we're working on. It's still very much in the works. But basically, sorry, excuse me one moment.
Would you like to get started making your own voice profile?
Thank you all for your patience.
Teacher has no class.
All right, I think I lost my place. I was talking about the art projects. Yes, so after we have these dialogues, these really complicated conversations, I'm so excited for them. We'll see what happens, right? I can't even predict what these brilliant students are going to talk about, but we're going to build some artwork with some local artists across the different communities that our students are a part of. And right now we're leaving a little bit open because we know we have a lot of creative students in this group, and we want to give them some say in what's the medium, what's the media, what are we going to actually produce.
Mommy, can I look at? Can you look at?
Thanks all. Hopefully that's the last interruption. So we will see what comes together from all of this, right? I think we purposely are leaving it a little bit open because we do want to be responsive to the students. And as Quan already mentioned, there's so much in the text, and there's so many ways that students are going to react, and what they're going to pull out of it, we don't know. There's so many amazing things there to work with. But I do want to just speak a little bit more to why this text is so important in this move to get Asian American studies into K-12 schools, because I think it's such a great text for integrating dialogue and art. Two things I think are really important if we're going to take anti-bias, anti-racist approaches to teaching, because we definitely need more of both of those things happening in schools, not as one-offs, not as fillers, not as additives, but as core to students' learning experiences. And as Quan already mentioned, this book is a tremendous example of representation by bringing this into classrooms here, introducing our students to this text and to many texts as a way to complicate the narratives of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, as well as all of our communities of color, in ways that are really authentic and that our students are really going to respond to, so that our students are seeing and learning many more stories that are going to dismantle this model minority myth and this monolith, so that we're learning our true history as a nation. Hold on a sec.
Okay, it's been a sec.
It has been a sec, that's true.
Now do it.
So basically, I'm really excited about what we're doing because I think we're going to learn our history. She's not going to stop. And be able to build a future where all of us, not just AAPI folks, get to learn and to co-create a more just and beautiful world with our young people. I got to stop talking now because she needs the phone.
I need the phone more than you do.
JHD, thank you so much. I mean, your work with us and who you are as a parent and community member are just so visible to us right now, and we love you deeply. And you know, this is just another example of the context in which we've been working, and why this kind of collaboration is so important, that we see each other in these contexts where, you know, we're trying to do something that hasn't been done before, and you know, having these connections and this vision is just, you know, so challenging, but also I've just gotten such tremendous energy from this group. You know, seeing, you know, teachers just absorb this material and learn through it and be inspired by it has just been so exciting. We're very lucky to have with us tonight Keith Fowler, who teaches at Naugatuck, and you know, Keith, thank you. We're so lucky to have you share what you've done in your classroom. Please, you know, feel free to introduce yourself more than what I've offered. And I've learned so much too from your engagement with it and how you've taught it with your students. Tremendous.
Thank you so much, Jason. Can you hear me? Just checking. Okay, cool. First of all, Jenny, what a legend. My kids are in the bedroom next door with the wife literally holding them down. So I was ready for them to come in, but still carried on the narrative and the message. I love it. Yeah. So yeah, my name's Keith Fowler. I teach all kinds of stuff at Naugatuck High School, social studies, and increasingly some education classes. So trying to encourage students to be educators themselves and to make our staff less disproportionately white. So just had to get my main mission in there. This has been a real honor to be invited to talk about this book and to be one of the first teachers to pilot and do this experimental work with the best that we could do. And I'm so supportive of the work you've done, Jason, to bring AAPI studies to Connecticut schools. Super exciting. Okay, so I'm going to jump in and try to share my screen here. The controls just came up. Too many video sources. It says ask your host to remove a source and try again. I don't know if that's possible. Just it would be great to share on the screen some of the student work.
Anna says to try again now.
Okay. Oh, that looks different and better. Okay, here we go. Okay. All right, so let's see. Jason, if you could just see, now I can't see you guys. Can you see the Prezi video screen with my face?
Yes, it looks great.
Okay, cool. So hello, everyone. Good evening. This is really honestly a great honor for me. I'll do my best to talk a little bit about what we did with the book in the classroom, and also some of the connections that I made with the book personally. So the class that I taught, the best we could do with was the ECE Health and Education in Urban Communities. It's an early college experience class through UConn. Just 10 students. It's the first time we've offered the class at the high school. And here are my blessings right here at the start of the school year. And yeah, let's just dive right in. So just to talk for any teachers out there, some of the different reading approaches that we tried with the book was, I think the main one, and this wasn't through you know, any pressure from me, but I think generally it worked best for the students. If I was reading out loud and the visuals were up on the screen, or the students had their books in their hand, I used Hoopla to access it in a digital way. So pretty standard there. We did try a couple times some kind of performative reading with students taking characters, sound effects coming in an ad hoc way, someone taking the narrator. That was, you know, I could have stuck with that more. I will be critical of myself because I think it has potential. But because of the nature of the graphic novel, the medium was challenging. You know, it's not all linear left to right going down the lines. You've got sound effects and voices coming from all over the place. The pages are set up different. So I think if with practice, this could be the most exciting and dramatic, engaging method. But I didn't try to, I didn't stick with that one enough, I think. We also did some silent chapter reading with the students reading the chapter at their own pace and taking it in internally on their own. So that was something that the students asked for, and we did that as well. So that was another reading method. How did we discuss the book, and how did we make our thinking visible? So, you know, I did not want to be dictating the terms of any discussion. So we would always begin a free association moment after we finished a chapter, something along the lines of what hit you, what stood out in that chapter, and let the conversation go where it went, and find out what came up. And, you know, it was often quite surprising what came up for students, what connections and associations they were making. Next, we had the thematic discussion. So we would have this slide up on the screen, and, you know, again, to any teachers considering using this book, reach out to Jason and Jenny for the teacher resources. Literally never in my 16, 17, whatever, however many years I've been in education, I've never had a set of resources so well prepared. This was just one thing that was prepared for us, was the different themes running throughout the books. You know, we tried to connect what was a piece of action. Let's try and connect it thematically, and even what was some intersections. I mean, obviously this book was all about a lot of these themes running together. You know, they weren't discrete. So that was really interesting. And that's probably our most rich source of, you know, prompt of discussion there. The title of my class, you know, the focus of the UConn class is health and education here at the high school. So, you know, I felt a duty to try and connect it back, and a challenge intellectually. You know, how can we connect the action in the best we could do back to the main topics of our course? So, for example, you know, there was a passage where Bo is hiding. He's hearing gunfire. He's hearing screaming and death. How would his health and education be impacted? Brought up talks of PTSD, students, you know, kids living in poverty and seeing, you know, violence, etc. So that was actually, you know, a rich source of discussion. And then we would do just bite-sized reflection products where, of course, student choice. for them to curate and choose the topic and product themselves. So we'll just have a real quick look at a couple paragraphs, a couple Google slides, and a Play-Doh sculpture. Let's see if I can do this thing here. Yeah, okay. So one of the students, Brittany, wrote a nice piece here, just a short paragraph on family dynamics and generational trauma. That was the theme. Here she kind of recounts the action, which is great, describes what piece she wants to focus on. And then this was where, as I was talking about, trying to connect it to our course specifically. So she says, with regards to our health and education course, I know that generational trauma can have long-term symptoms such as anxiety and depression. In our current society and both society, there is a stigma around therapy and mental health awareness, but it is extremely important because it can affect everyone around us unconsciously. So I thought that that was just a really nice, a really nice connection there that she made. Here, let's do this again. All right. So Brianna did a lovely slide here where she's looking at the visual aspects, and obviously the aesthetics of this book was so powerful and so transformative and transporting even. Brianna writes, I think that the visual aspects of The Best We Could Do is incredibly enriching to the reading experience of this novel and convey a more powerful message through its images. For example, when Thi depicts herself having a hole in her body in the shape of Vietnam, this image helps to convey Thi's feelings in a way that impacts the reader much more. When looking at the illustration, you can see red illustrations of the sea and Vietnam, furthering Thi's idea of being alienated from our home country. Just really quite deep and perceptive there, which I really enjoyed that. So that was just one slide. Hey, just, you know, make one slide, grab an image, and put your thoughts down. And again, just another example here of very bite size, a page of the book, and what's jumping out: aesthetics, darkness and fear, mental health, you know, and those educational impacts. This was the scene I was talking about with Bo. This was a fun one. One of the students, Emily, really enjoys working with her hands and has always been into Play-Doh since being a kid. And again, trying to recreate the image of the Vietnam-shaped void, if you will, at the heart of the main character. So I thought that was a fun and a very different way of responding. We also had micro podcasts, just 60-second audio files, students again creating the content and choosing a different modality in which to respond. You'll hear from Tenzin soon. I won't play his podcast because you know, you're going to get to hear Tenzin in the flesh just in a moment. And just to finish off, my personal connection with the book, you know, a lot of the themes of generational and family, you know, ancestral work that is done with this book, starting off with my friend I met in San Diego, Tuan, you know, sending him this book and talking to him about his family left Vietnam in the late 70s as refugees, boat people. You know, he grew up in Colorado, and then San Diego is raising his child there. And so I think earlier Kwan said part of the beauty of the book is it sparks meaningful conversations inside and outside of the classroom. And I felt that personally. You know, it happened for me with my friend Tuan and deepened our relationship. And, you know, those conversations, the stories will keep coming, I know. And then my granddad, who I knew had been in the Navy, and I didn't know before reading this book and didn't research his role in Vietnam. So, you know, now we're talking about how I am descended from the aggressor, the oppressor in the Vietnam War. You know, and here is granddad with he's right here with a member of, you know, his counterparts in the South Vietnamese Naval Command. My uncle thinks this is perhaps in the Mekong Delta. You know, and what I didn't realize was that, you know, it ended up between 71 and 73. Granddad went from being the deputy commander to the commander of all American naval forces. and in charge of pulling the forces out. He apparently put his hand up and volunteered for the job. No one else wanted it. And yet we had our own family scars, minuscule, of course, in comparison to the scars suffered by the Vietnamese. But still, he was estranged from his eldest son, Henry, my uncle Henry, who was a conscientious objector and who died tragically in a plane crash in the early 1980s, and they hadn't yet resolved their differences over Vietnam. So that was, this book kind of exploded in my personal life as well, and helped me make connections that I just never would have, and do research into my family history. So it's a powerful book, and thank you for your time and attention. Okay. Hopefully this, okay, I'm back. Shall I hand straight over to Tenzin? This is my student in the class that read the book, Tenzin Dunlop.
Yeah. I can hear a bit of an echo. I'm sorry. I'm like hearing myself. Okay.
Keith, you might have to mute too.
I can work with this. So as to why I personally connected with this book, I'm a first generation Tibetan American, and therefore the product of war, genocide, and immigration. So being able to see myself in a real and productive way within the curriculum, I felt was really empowering, but also enriching to both my education and my peers. But more generally speaking, I think the best we could do was a very cathartic experience for me. I think it helped me sort of solidify my understandings of my personal generational trauma, and as Kwan beautifully put, come to some generational understandings. So some more background. I grew up on a Tibetan settlement in India, and I moved back to America when I was 6 to start elementary school. And my parents, they also immigrated to America from northern India. So, like being able to see bits of my experiences encapsulated so beautifully in the book and in artistic mediums, and just like thematically, I thought was very empowering. And also seeing my my dad, my Bala, and my mom, my Amla, reflected in Ma and Bo, and seeing the way that Thi Bui beautifully connects these 3 generations through the role of war and violence, I felt was essential to that. And as JHD said, like, I felt that this book has another role of breaking the monolith, like to humanize the experiences of Asian Americans and truly show the depth and diversity that that exists within individual and collective Asian experiences in America. And also on the topic of being able to see myself so directly in the curriculum for, I would say, like one of the first few times in my educational career, it was also very important. I think that I referenced it earlier, but coming to understandings of my personal generational trauma, like understanding as Thi Bui put it, the wounds beneath wounds, I felt was important because my my dad, he grew up grew up through an abusive boarding school, and kind of connecting that to the way that Bo is within the book, the experiences that he's had to endure, and as a result, like the kind of person that he became, how stern he is, and to an extent, bitter, and then like being able to kind of connect the dots back to my personal experiences, and coming to those generational understandings, I thought was very valuable. Um, and but I will say, like, I don't think that the discussions that we had within the classroom were all this melodramatic. I thought that there were many wholesome ones. For example, I was able to talk with well, we were able to have very cool conversations about masculinity, especially within American society. But I was able to bring in bits of my experiences as an Asian American, and sort of the role of masculinity in Asian cultures, or East Asian cultures. And we were able to have a conversation on um, sort of the dissonance between American and Asian American experiences pertaining to love languages. Specifically how, like, I think one of the main characters in the book was angry in the way that, like, love wasn't expressed the same way in Asian households, and I got to explain that in Asian households, like, the words "I love you" don't really like float around, right? Because they're more so done through acts of service, and like being able to connect with my classmates in that way, I thought was really enriching. And by connecting the book to central themes of refugees, resettlement, oral history, gender and family, war and nation, politics, struggle, freedom, and self-determination, I felt that everyone had something to contribute to discussions. And what's it called? Sorry. And sorry. And we were even able to just appreciate the artistry of the book, and being able to just enjoy Thi Bui's talents and connect it back to motifs from East Asian art, such as oceans and the dream like visuals that the book was able to capture. And Mr. Fowler did a wonderful job at connecting things that we learned in history classes at the high school back to the book, and vice versa. So I felt that by having something that was so directly focused on Asian American studies or Asian studies, and then relating that back to like what we already know and learned, was a really fruitful experience. But generally, I felt that the entire class was able to participate over many intersectional lines, such as race, gender, ethnicity, and class. And as for some final notes, I will say that I'm extremely proud of everything that educators across the state have been able to do to make sure that Asian voices are heard within the curricula, are properly and holistically represented and purposefully represented within the curriculum. But I will say, like, reading the book, I was thinking about another Connecticut native, Ocean Vuong, an Asian American author. And for maybe potential future readings, I highly recommend his book, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. So Ocean Vuong, he's also Vietnamese, and he grew up in Hartford, I think. So it's really close to home. But his book, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, beautifully and brilliantly captures the childhood and adulthood within in a Vietnamese American family, especially in the context of generational trauma, war, but in a way that is sorry. I think that the best we could do, and On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous are great in their own right, but I feel that some of the strengths of Vuong's book is that its contents are, I don't want to say, but for lack of better words, like more mature, referencing or dealing with things such as PTSD in a very visceral way, sex, sexuality, gender, and some parts of the Asian American experiences, to continue breaking the monolith. So yeah.
Keith, Tenzin, thank you so much for sharing your experience this evening. For me, hearing these stories, reinforces to me the importance of the approach that we're taking to thinking about how do we want to see this material in schools. These experiences aren't something that we can script and hand out, but I think it shows the importance of involving involving folks in multiple different kinds of ways, and that involvement requires resource support. It requires the opportunities for learning and patience, and to and that we see the curriculum in the schools as a pathway to making broader community connections, and that's one of the key dimensions of what we see when what we try to achieve when we're thinking about violence reduction. We think about generating cultural change around anti-racism. That the curriculum is just one piece of that puzzle, and we have to do that with intention to connect and transform, not merely just to transmit. And so this is really such a fantastic, stories that you all have shared, and these are just one teacher, and we're doing this with many others, and so excited to continue this work this year with these teachers, and do this again. And I think that's the key takeaway, is that this is something that we want to keep the momentum going, involve more people, and to involve more resources, more literature that can connect with so many different levels and so many different communities. So again, thank you, Kwan, JHD, Keith, Tenzin, all the participants, all the viewers. Thank you for tuning in. It's been wonderful to share this evening with you. And now I want to welcome Joseph back up to share with us more programming from the Lit Talks.
All right, thank you, Jason. That was wonderful. That was wonderful. We haven't had a talk like this yet. I appreciate you taking the time and putting it together. And a community. I mean, the goal of the festival is to engage the entire state. It's just an umbrella organization to have these kind of conversations. And you guys really produced it with our little help. So I thank you very much for that, Jason. And best to you in this continued work. Awesome. So we're going to, again, thank everyone for tonight. Thank you for viewing. Again, the Connecticut Literary Festival is based out of CCSU, but we're here for all readers and writers in the state and students. We have a full slate of Lit Talks. Please check out our webpage. We're going to do a piece with Indigenous writers, and it's going to be 3 writers reading and talking about Indigenous writing. Then we're going to do a piece on biography at the end of March. And then in April, we have some more. So please check our website. This spring, we're doing our big event, so to speak, is Earth Day. We're going to celebrate the Earth with poets and science at Real Artways, another one of our partners. And that is April 22nd. That's a Friday on Earth Day. It'll start in the morning with a neighborhood cleanup around Parkville in Hartford. And then we'll have programming with the Poet Laureate of the state, Margaret Gibson, is the co-producer of the event. So please check our website. Please support us if you can. And thank you very much for attending this evening. And I tell you to drive safe, but you're already all home. So thanks a lot. Bye-bye.